This is something that happened not too long ago. I was at home with my wife, and we were in the living room together watching a movie. By this point, it was a little bit later. Our living room is at the front of the house, and behind our couch is the front windows. We were both sitting on the couch, and as the movie was going on, my wife and I were very focused on it. At one point, the entire TV screen went black during the film. This was part of the movie, but for this few seconds there was a reflection on the screen because of it, and we could sort of see ourselves. But then I noticed something behind us. I couldn't see well at all, but it appeared as though somebody was at the window. I turned around and looked out of our large living room window. When I did, I saw a man quickly move to the side and go out of my view. My wife turned around too and asked what that was. I told her that I saw a guy at the window, and this guy had been like right on the other side looking in. I didn't see any details about him or what he looked like really. It all happened so fast. So I got up from the couch and I paused the movie. My wife then covered the window with the shades. I didn't know who this guy was or why he was on our property, but I figured that I should do something. So I decided to go outside and see if the guy had left or not. I walked over to the front door, which was just feet away from the window. I opened it and then stepped outside. When I looked around, I did not see the guy. I looked along the front of our house and he was not there. So either he left our property entirely or had gone around to the backyard or something. I called out asking if anybody was there. There was no response. Trying to sound tough, I loudly said, "Whoever you are, get off my property." I looked around and still heard and saw nothing. So I figured at that point that he was gone, and I didn't want to be outside anymore as I was admittedly a little creeped out. But before I went back inside, I heard my wife yelling from somewhere in the house. I quickly went back in and heard her calling my name. She was towards the back end of the house and told me that the guy tried breaking in. I walked over towards our back door, and when I got over there, I saw the guy running through the yard out the window. He left our backyard and then hopped the fence into a neighbor's yard. I decided right then and there to call the police. I got the phone and dialed 911. When I reported what happened, I was told that police were already on the way to our neighborhood. I was sort of confused at first. A short time later though, the cops got there. When they arrived, there was like 4 police vehicles. One of them stopped in front of our house and the others went to other neighbors on the street. The officer that went to our house told me that multiple other neighbors had called the cops. There had been reports of a man attempting to break into houses. I realized that our house must have not been the only one that he was at. The police searched the area, and the man was located hiding in someone's backyard at the end of the block. It was a crazy situation. When I had gone outside to look for the guy, my wife had heard someone trying to open the back door. Thankfully, it was locked. That's when she called for me. Prior to the man looking in our window, I guess he was in another neighbor's backyard and was pounding on their window. They ended up waking up, and when the lights turned on, he ran. They called the cops, and that's why the police were already on the way. I'm not sure who the guy was or why he was trying to break into houses in our neighborhood, but I'm really glad that he was caught. I was driving back home really late one night on the highway. You see, I had been a designated driver for a friend. I hadn't really planned on it, but it was a weekend and about 1 a.m. and I still happened to be awake. I was 21 years old at the time and was in college, living with my parents during the summer break. We lived sort of out in the country, and the nearby town is about a 10-minute drive from my house. There they have stores, restaurants, and bars, which is where my friend was. She had been drinking, and when she called me, asked if I would come and give her a ride home. This didn't seem like a big deal for me, so I said yes, and then left our house in my car. I drove to the bar, picked her up, and then dropped her off at her house, which was another 10 minutes from mine or so. After dropping her off, I was driving down the highway to get back to my parents' house. By now, with it being well after midnight, the highway was very quiet. Surrounding it was mostly farmland and woods. As I drove, I felt the car start to sputter, and then I realized that I was running out of gas. Quickly, the car started slowing down, and I couldn't get it to drive any farther. I came to a stop on the side of the road on the highway, having run out of gas entirely. Now, this was completely my fault. I remember that earlier that day when I went to work, my gas light was on and my tank was basically empty. I was too lazy to get gas then though, and I knew that I would be leaving the next morning anyways, so I told myself I would stop and get gas then. I did not anticipate having to give my friend a ride that night and didn't think about the gas when I had left. So I had fully ran out, and now I was stranded on the side of the road in the middle of the night. Instantly, I was creeped out. It was very dark and quiet. No other cars were driving by at all, and to be frank, I didn't want them to either. I figured that some creeps are probably out driving at this hour. I didn't want to call anybody because of the time. My parents were sleeping, as were most of my friends, and the ones that weren't sleeping were probably too drunk to drive with it being a Friday night. I did know that there was a gas station a ways up the road though. I wasn't sure exactly how far it was, if it was half a mile, or maybe 2 miles, but I figured that I could maybe walk there and get a gallon of gas or so back to my car. I got out and stepped into the cool night. It was foggy, which added to the creepy feeling. I was just hoping that nobody would drive by or anything. I locked my car and then started walking up the road. When I had made it maybe 100 feet past my car, I heard another car approaching from behind. My heart sank. I hoped that whoever this was would just drive past me and keep going. Unless it was a cop, then maybe they could help me out. Obviously, being a young, small female, I did not want to accept a ride or help from a stranger on the side of the road in the middle of the night. The car behind me got louder and louder as it approached. Then I heard it slowing down, which I dreaded. I turned and looked over my shoulder to see the car approaching. It was an old white van, one of those stereotype creepy white vans that everybody tells you to avoid. It did not have any logos or company names on it, and it was dirty and looked to be at least 20 years old. The van approached me and then slowed down and drove past me sort of. Then it slowed down even more and started driving at about the same speed as me. Pretty soon it was even with me. I continued walking as the van matched my speed of probably 3 or 4 miles per hour. I looked over thinking that the driver would roll the window down and ask if I needed help or something. But when I turned to look at the driver, I saw a man driving, but he didn't roll the window down. He wasn't even really looking at me. As I continued to look at him, he glanced over at me. He had long hair, I remember, and a beard, and was wearing an old beat-up looking cap. I will say that the man's overall appearance matched his vehicle, like he was exactly who you would expect to hop out of something like that. So I was really creeped out now, and the guy never rolled down his window. He just kept driving alongside of me. So then I stopped, and he stopped too, but he didn't say anything or roll the window down still. The van was now just stopped on the side of the road next to me. It wasn't even out of its driving lane fully. I motioned to him that I was good and said, "I don't need any help, I'm fine." He didn't say anything, and did not drive away either. I then started walking faster. The van started driving again and once more matched my speed. After going another 50 feet or so, the van finally did something different. It went ahead of me and then pulled over to the side of the road. The way that it pulled over was sort of diagonal, so that it was completely blocking my path. This told me that I needed to get out of there. I turned around and just started running the opposite way. I was sprinting as fast as I could and going back towards my car. I didn't look back for a while, and when I was maybe halfway back, I turned around and finally looked. The van had started to back up. I saw its taillights on as the van started reversing down the road. I kept running towards my car. Eventually, I made it there and went back inside of it and locked all the doors. The van was still a long ways up and still reversing. I was so scared that I went into the back seat of my car and then grabbed a blanket that I had back there and hid under it. I tried to calm myself down. At least now I was in a locked car. As I was under there, I remember hearing another car on the road. This one passed by me on the highway. I remained where I was for at least 5 minutes, I would say. I didn't hear anything else. I was expecting at any moment the man to try to break into my car or something, but he didn't. Then I finally sat up and looked around. The van was gone. No cars were anywhere in sight. It was a huge relief. I then came to my senses after calming down and called the cops. They arrived pretty quickly. I told them what happened, and they gave me a lift to the gas station and back to buy some gas. Another officer said that he would keep an eye out for the van. I was able to make it home safe that night, but heard nothing more of the creepy guy or his van. I feel very lucky that I made it away from him that night. I think that other random car that drove by when I got back to my car scared the man off. There was no doubt in my mind that he was planning to kidnap me or something. So whoever drove by randomly that night, thank you. This happened 5 years ago when I was 23, and I just wanted to make friends because I was waiting for someone special for me. I talked and chatted with everyone because I like to make new friendships. One day, this guy added me on Facebook. He was from a city 5 hours from mine, and he added me and messaged me instantly. Nothing strange about his profile. We talked for 1 hour about some cliché things, like what do you do in your free time. We eventually talked about video games, and we played a lot of similar games, so we added each other on PlayStation to play together. We played video games with each other for about a month, and it was fun. He had my same sense of humor, which was dark humor and sarcasm, so we got along well. While gaming once, he told me he left his ex-girlfriend 1 year prior because she cheated on him, so he pointed his gun against her because he was angry, but of course it was just to scare her. I told him that was horrible and creepy, but he said that he was just joking and that it wasn't true, which I just chalked up to his sense of humor. One day he asked me about my love life, and I told him that I was just searching for friends, and he was totally fine with that. I actually really liked playing video games with him. He respected that I wasn't looking for a relationship, and he wasn't flirting at all. Long story short, after having been playing video games with him for about a month, one night I joked about blaming my best friend for not going with me to the movies that night. So I joked with him, laughing that I was going to watch the movie I wanted to see alone tomorrow night. The next day at 8 p.m., he messaged me on Facebook, which again was weird, because at that point we had only talked when we were playing video games together. He messaged me saying hi and asked what I was doing. I messaged back and said, nothing at all. I'm playing a video game and waiting for my dinner to be ready. He messaged back and said, so you aren't going to the movies still tonight? He attached a picture of my hometown sign where you drive past it and it says welcome to the city. I freaked out. Not only was it the weirdest thing ever, but I told him about the main city near where I live, not the small town where I actually lived. There were tons of suburbs near the main town, which I told him about, so it's not like he could have guessed where I lived. I'm not sure if he was a hacker or if it was some other coincidence, but he somehow found out where I lived. He also messaged me saying that he drove 5 hours to come and get me for the movie we were going to go see. I basically told him that I wasn't going to a movie with him, and it was inappropriate for him to show up unannounced like that. All he responded with was that he had asked for 2 free days at work, and he was near my house now, and I needed to get ready to go. I responded and said if this was an elaborate prank, it was funny, but if he was being for real, I would call the police if he showed up. I had never asked him to come over, or even told him where I lived, or mentioned anything that we should hang out in person. He got angry at me through text, typing in all caps that he was coming anyways to my house, and that he was tired of driving and I should just accept his nice surprise. I blocked him and told everything to my parents. He sent me a picture of my home from another number. My dad, who is a bodybuilder, went out into the garden and waited hours to get ready to beat the guy up if he tried to approach our house at all. I don't know if this creep saw my dad and got scared, or if it was just a strange prank, but I didn't sleep that night. Later that night, he messaged me over PlayStation, saying that he had arrived home and did 10 hours of driving for nothing. I blocked his PlayStation account and Facebook account, cutting all ties with him. 2 days later, he tried to add me with a new Facebook profile, but I blocked it in a flash. Luckily, I've never heard from him since. Maybe he was a nice guy who didn't understand social cues or situations well. But after only a month of chatting together while gaming, I found it quite creepy that he decided to show up out of the blue. One night, I was home alone watching a movie on TV. I'd been flipping through the channels until I found something interesting, like I often do. I live by myself in an apartment, and it's a pretty average place for the most part. As it got to be late at night, I was starting to get tired. Out of nowhere, randomly, there was a knock on my apartment front door. At first, I thought that it was one of my neighbors complaining about the noise. The volume of the movie on my TV was pretty loud, to be honest, so I quickly turned it down and then got up from the couch and walked over to the front door. Before opening the door, I looked through the peephole. I saw a young woman standing there. She looked to be in her 20s, had dark hair and a few tattoos on her arms. I didn't recognize her, but then again, I didn't know most of my neighbors. Thinking she was still a neighbor, I opened the door. Before she said anything, I said, "Sorry, I didn't realize I had the volume so loud." In my mind, I was 100% sure that she was complaining about the noise, because I had no idea what on earth else a neighbor would be at my door for. She looked confused for a moment and then said, "No, that's fine." Then she told me that she was in an awkward situation. She said her boyfriend had accidentally backed into my car in the parking lot. Her boyfriend was apparently over at the car and didn't want to leave the scene, so she came in to tell me. I parked my car in the same spot every day in the parking lot, and it was out there, and our lot was sort of small. Things would get crowded with cars, so I was sort of annoyed by this, but was also glad that the woman was telling me about it and they didn't just drive away. I told her 1 second I would go and get my phone, and she said okay. I needed my phone for insurance stuff and to take pictures of the damage. I quickly went back into my apartment, and my phone was still on the couch in the living room. When I got it, I was now at the back end of my apartment and near my balcony. There was a large window, and from there you could see most of the parking lot and sort of the area where I parked. I was curious, so I went over and looked out of the window. I saw the parking lot, and it seemed completely quiet. When I looked to where my car was, I could just barely see it, but I could in fact see it, and it appeared to be just fine. There was nobody standing around it and no car right next to it or anything. I couldn't see any damage. Suddenly, this whole thing seemed really sketchy. I went back to the door and opened it again. The woman was still there. I asked her how much damage there was to the car. She said it was pretty bad and we better go to the car now. There definitely was not a lot of damage on my car. I told her that she must be mistaken. She mentioned my full name and asked if that was me. I said yes, and then she confirmed that yes, it was my car that had been hit. I was confused. I explained to her that I just saw my car out the window and it didn't look like there was any damage on it at all. She looked at me but did not say anything. Then the woman just turned and walked away without saying a word. She was quickly gone. I went back inside my apartment. Then I looked out the window again towards the parking lot. Things were really quiet there for a minute or two, but I continued watching. I saw the same woman as well as a man come into my view. Both of them walked into a random car which was not even close to mine, and then quickly drove away. I was really creeped out by the whole thing. I had never seen that woman before in my life prior to that night. I couldn't help but feel that she was trying to set me up. She was with a guy, and maybe they were going to try to rob me or something. I'm really glad that I didn't follow her. But how did she know which car was mine? Or how did she know my name? That part is something that I still don't know. I had a business trip pretty far away from where I live one time. Well, this happens a lot, and I travel all over for work. If it's really far, I will fly, but most of the time I just drive if it is within like 5 hours. So one time I was driving back home, and it was pretty late at night. I was on the highway and had been driving for a long time already. At like midnight, I needed a break, so I decided to pull off at the next rest stop. I wanted to use the restroom and get a drink and maybe a snack. So after a few miles, I saw a sign for a rest area up ahead, and I took the exit. When I got off the highway, I saw that it was a smaller rest stop. Some rest stops are large, have gas stations and travel stations and things like that. Others have much less. This one was basically a road that led directly back onto the highway. On the right side was a long row of diagonal parking spaces, and then the rest stop was past that. There was a small grass area with some picnic tables nearby and woods behind it. When I pulled in, there were 2 cars parked in the lot. One was pretty much right in front of the doors of the rest stop building, and the other was a ways down. I parked right between the 2, but closer to the second car. When I parked, I noticed that the car was an older 4-door sedan from maybe the 90s or the early 2000s. It appeared as though whoever was in it was trying to sleep in the car, because I saw that there were blankets over all the windows, and all the lights were off as well. As I got out of my car, I walked to the small rest stop building, and I saw 2 people leaving. It was a man and a woman, possibly husband and wife, walking out towards the other car that was parked closer to the doors. They said a friendly hello as they passed, and then I walked in the rest stop. I used the restroom, got a drink from the vending machine, and then left. Aside from the restrooms, the only thing in the building was a small lobby with brochures and vending machines. I walked out, and it was now just my car and the car with blankets covering the windows. I got to my vehicle and went back inside. Then I started my car and left the parking lot. But as soon as I did, I saw the car next to me back up and start to leave. This took me by surprise because I thought the occupant of the car had been sleeping. And when this car left, it didn't turn on any of its lights. So now I drove out of the rest stop and back towards the highway, and this old car was following me with no lights on. I got back onto the highway and the car was behind me. I started driving and this car behind me followed me at an average distance. There were really no other cars on the road at this hour though. I wasn't that worried at first, but the fact that this car never turned on its lights raised red flags in my head. We continued driving for a good 10 minutes. When the car was still behind me, I decided to slow down in hopes that it would pass, but it did not. The car just kept going at the same speed as me. I went faster, and the car went faster too, all while never having turned its lights on. By this point, I was really worried that the car was following me for some reason. I couldn't tell who was driving, but I decided that I would take the next exit. So with an exit coming up, I turned right and took it. The car behind me did as well. I didn't even know where I was or anything. I turned and went onto some random quiet road. Unfortunately, this was not a big city at all. In fact, it looked like a very small town. There were no gas stations or businesses that I could see. I kept driving down the road with the car behind me and then took another turn. Now I was in some random neighborhood out in the country. I drove down the street, still being followed. As I went down the street, I panicked. I turned to another street, which the car behind me did as well. Then I turned into some random driveway. I don't really know why. I wasn't thinking clearly and was panicked. But when I pulled into that driveway, I stopped. The car behind me did not turn in, but stopped at the end of the driveway. It was blocking my way of leaving. Whoever was in the car did not immediately get out. Then, about 20 seconds later, I saw the door to the house that I was parked at open. A man walked out and looked confused. When he did, the car behind me suddenly drove off, still without turning on its lights. It quickly went down the street, and the homeowner, who looked borderline angry, started walking towards me. I rolled down my window and explained how the guy had been following me and I didn't know why. I said I was sorry to go to his place and I would leave now. The man just said okay and still seemed confused. Then I backed out and left, going the opposite way of the car. I got my maps on my phone calibrated again and then drove the rest of the way back home. I was able to arrive safely and did not see the car for the rest of my trip. I'm not sure who that guy was, but I'm glad that I got away from him. He must have seen me leaving the rest stop, and after the other people left, knew that I was all alone. I'm not sure why he never turned his lights on, I guess to be more suspicious. But I'm really glad that that man came out of his house when I pulled into his driveway, and that was by far my scariest experience out on the highway. When I was about 12 or 13, I used to play a lot of video games with my best friend, and we often played shooter games together. As you can imagine, it's easy to get frustrated, and at one point I ended up breaking my PlayStation controller. Since I didn't have a spare and couldn't continue playing, I told my friend that I had to stop. He said I could come over and borrow his second controller since he didn't live far away, just a short walk. I said all right and told him that I would be over soon. So I grabbed my keys and started walking to his house. It was already dark, and since it was winter, it was snowing and very foggy. While walking, I had a strange feeling, like I was being watched. I kept looking around, but didn't see anyone. When I arrived at my friend's place and picked up the controller, I saw through a window that a man was standing in the middle of the street. I pointed it out to my friend, and we both wondered who it was and why he was standing there. It looked like a person, but we couldn't make out any details, just a silhouette. Eventually, we decided to go outside and see if the person needed help or if something was wrong. We stepped out and asked what was going on, but there was no response. The person just stared at us and then walked away. We were both confused and told his parents, but they just brushed it off, thinking we were imagining things because we play too many video games. After a while of hanging out, I figured it was time to head home, since there was plenty of night left and we wanted to game together more still. I almost forgot about this strange encounter, but when I was walking back, I started to feel that same eerie sensation of being watched. I saw a few people on walks with dogs, but they all seemed normal, nothing strange. But just before I got home, I looked behind me one last time, and I saw that person again, this time standing behind a tree, staring at me. Then they started walking towards me, and eventually they began running. I could tell that it was an older man, probably around 60, but I was surprised at how fast he was running. He was shouting something in a language I didn't understand, and he didn't seem happy. I ran for my life, clutching my keys, and tried to unlock the front door as fast as possible. When I got inside, I quickly glanced back, but the man was gone. I rushed to my room and immediately got on the game and told my friend about what had just happened. He suggested I call the police, which I did. But since my description wasn't very detailed, the police took a report, but didn't seem to take it too seriously. My parents were visibly shocked when I told them later, but nothing ever came of it. In my village, 4 other people reported similar experiences, saying that someone was watching them or following them. No one was ever caught by the police. To this day, no one knows who this man is, whether he's just trying to scare people or if it's something more sinister. Nobody knows for sure, but everyone agrees that it seems to be a man around 60 years old. Beyond that, nobody can give a detailed description. This happened when I was 18 or 19. It was a summer night, probably late July or early August. It was warm out, so a friend and I had gotten into the habit of driving around late at night just to talk. We'd do loops outside the city, the kind of quiet, empty roads that cut through the French countryside. No real destination, just driving and talking, windows cracked, music low. This one night it was around 1:30 a.m., and the road was completely empty. No streetlights, no visible houses, just open fields on both sides. We were going slow, talking about something personal. Suddenly, my friend hit the brakes. He didn't yell or panic, just a sharp, reflexive stop. There in the headlights, I saw a man crossing the road. He came out of the field to our left, walking towards the one on the right. What immediately struck me was that he was completely naked. His skin was an oddly pale, flat beige, almost like a dull gray. But that's not what stuck with me. It was the way that he moved. He didn't walk like a drunk or someone who was hurt. It was more like he didn't weigh anything. His steps were slow and floaty, almost like he was forcing his body to move forward. His arms hung loose, his head tilted slightly down. He never turned towards us. No reaction to the lights, the sound, nothing. He crossed slowly and disappeared into the field on the other side. We were silent for a couple of seconds, processing, and then my friend accelerated away down the road. We drove back towards the main road, not saying much. I wasn't scared exactly, but I felt this deep, uneasy feeling like what I had seen didn't make sense. The next day, out of curiosity, we went back in the afternoon. We recognized the spot easily because of a twisted tree by the roadside, but when we looked around, there was nothing. No trail, no path, no house nearby. Just two big fields and the same empty, quiet road cutting through. I have no rational explanation for what we saw, but I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't normal. This happened just a couple of months ago. It was the weekend, and I was up late watching TV. I was in the living room of my apartment and relaxing after a long day of work. My apartment is not that big. It's basically one giant room with a kitchen at the front by the door, and then the living room past that. I think that's a pretty standard setup. Then there's one bathroom and one bedroom off of that down the tiny hallway. So as I sat there feeling relaxed and having an ice-cold drink, I suddenly heard a knock at my apartment door. I didn't know who would possibly be there because I obviously was not expecting anybody. I looked over to the door but did not bother to get up. I figured that it was probably a mistake. Maybe somebody was trying to go to another apartment. After maybe 20 seconds, they knocked again. Then I heard a younger man's voice say, "DoorDash." Now, I did not order anything on DoorDash. In my mind, this was a simple mistake. One of my neighbors must have ordered food, and the delivery guy simply had his address mistaken. So I got up from the couch and started walking over to the door. My plan was to just tell the guy that he had the wrong place and to double-check the address. When I got to the door, I opened it. But as soon as I did, I saw that there was not just one guy there, but there was 3 men. They were all dressed in dark clothing and had sweatshirts and jackets with hoods up. My door was open for literally half a second, and as soon as I started to open it, I thought better of it and began to close it. The main guy right at the door then went forward and tried to stop me, but he must have realized that he would have gotten the door slammed on his arm because he almost reached in and then didn't. After I slammed my door shut, I very quickly locked it. Pretty much the next second, the guy tried to open the door. Then I heard the other 2 guys get closer. They kept trying to open the door, and then they started banging on it and kicking it as well. It was really loud, and I thought that the door might break. So I quickly ran into the other room, and then I got my phone and dialed 911. But the guys banging and trying to break in did not last long, because within probably a minute, it stopped. Then I heard them all running away down the hallway. I told the police what was going on, and they said they would have an officer there shortly. And the cops arrived pretty quick. It was probably within like 5 minutes. However, by that time, the men were all gone. I'm not sure where they went, but they were no longer in the apartment complex. I assumed that it was an attempted robbery, but I don't know why they picked me. My apartment is just like all the others. I'm not rich or anything, so maybe it was just random. I'm just glad that I had fast instincts to close the door as soon as I had opened it, or else I think they might have barged their way in. I was on a road trip by myself a few years ago. Fast forward through most of the trip, nothing notable happened regarding this story. But on the last day, or I guess second to last day, I was on my way back home. My plan was to try to drive through the night, or at least for as long as I could. I had Red Bulls and coffee throughout the day and night for caffeine. I was feeling pretty good, and as it was after midnight, I was not tired yet. I had been on road trips before, so I was pretty experienced with driving and stuff. My car was also very experienced, and I had taken it on several trips before. Unfortunately, it wore down, and as I was driving a little after midnight on the highway, it started to break down. I remember it started sounding real bad, and before I had a chance to pull over at the next exit or anything, it lost power. The car ended up slowing down, and then it broke down and came to a stop on the side of the road. I was frustrated, but then started going through my options. I was on a quiet highway that was surrounded by mostly woods and wild land. I didn't really know where I was aside from the state that I was in. I took out my phone to look at a map and to possibly call for help. However, I had no signal. That was a tough blow. I tried starting my car again, and it sounded like it almost started, but the engine wouldn't turn over. I had no idea if I was close to any kind of civilization or anything like that, and I was not aware of having ever been on that particular road before. The highway was very quiet by now. It was not a super busy highway, it was not a major highway, and by this hour, there was basically nobody else on the roads. I think I saw one random car passing by in the first 5 minutes I was sitting there on the side of the road. I was trying to think of what I could do. I kept trying to get a signal on my phone, but was having no luck. Finally, I decided to go out of the vehicle and maybe try to walk further down the road to get a signal, or possibly I could see a sign of how far the next town was. I opened up my door and it was eerily quiet. I didn't even hear any car sounds off in the distance. It was very dark and the woods was just beyond the ditch next to the road. It felt a little spooky being out there. After I left my car, I started walking around a bit, still trying my phone. I realized then that I had to pee, probably from all the caffeine drinks. I decided why not just go in the woods, so I started to walk towards the woods to take a leak. However, I did not want to be visible to any car driving by, and I wanted to make sure that I was out of sight. So I started walking through the woods and went in fairly deep. I found a nice private spot and did my business. Then I started to walk back through the woods towards my car. When I got back out of the woods, I was really surprised at what I saw. There was another car parked on the side of the road behind mine. At my very first glance, I thought that maybe it was a cop, but it was not. The car was a 4-door sedan and dark in color, but it was not the same kind of car as police. Like I said, it was pretty dark, so I couldn't tell who was inside of it. I also had no clue when the car got there exactly, other than it was obviously during the 2 minutes that I was in the woods. I hadn't really noticed hearing it drive up, but I had gone a good 40 or 50 feet into the woods probably. So I looked to the car, and nobody was getting out of it. I decided to walk over and let the driver know of my situation. I was nervous and hoped that it was a good Samaritan offering to help. When I walked closer to the car, I noticed that nobody was in the driver's seat. Then I got closer and looked in all the windows. No one was in the car. This was really strange. Where were they? The car had clearly just arrived, and now the driver was nowhere to be seen. It started to really creep me out. I was thinking that maybe the driver went in the woods after me, or maybe the driver was hiding someplace, like in the woods. I figured that my best option was to go back into my car and wait there. Maybe somehow I would get a signal. I decided to go in my car and then try restarting my phone. I went over to my driver's door and got in. As soon as I sat down, I got a glance in my rearview mirror. There was a random man sitting in my back seat. I jumped up just as fast as I sat down. I opened the door and ran out of my car. Then I ran all the way back into the woods and just kept going. I didn't stop until I was out of breath, at least 100 yards deep in the woods. There I stopped in a small clearing and gathered myself. I looked around and determined that I was not followed into the woods. I didn't hear anything at all. I looked around and grabbed a large tree branch to use as a weapon. Then I started walking back to the car. I slowly made my way through the woods, looking in all directions. When I reached the edge of the woods, sat there on the side of the road by itself. It was completely quiet and dark, just as it had been before. I carefully approached my car and looked inside. The man was gone. No one was there. I went back in my car and tried starting it again. It sounded rough, but this time it actually started, thank God. I drove out of there, and at the very next exit a few miles down the road, found a hotel for the night. I stayed there and got my car repaired in the morning. Thankfully, it was nothing that serious. After that, I went home, but I will never forget that scary experience. To this day, I don't know who that guy was. Why did he go in my car? I had obviously left the door unlocked when I had gone into the woods to pee, but the whole thing was just so creepy. What would have happened had I not gotten out of my car right away? Did the guy want to harm me? I'm really glad that he left, even though that part seems pretty random too. A few nights ago, me and my two buddies were hanging out as we usually do late on Friday night. We have this road near our town that leads to a military base gate. A right turn from the gate is a road that leads through a large section of woods and eventually back into town. The whole area is surrounded by woods for at least a few miles. It's common for people to street race down this road at night, as it has all kinds of fun twists and turns and is far from anybody. My friends and I often go there to drive fast and goof around with our cars, as we do it often. Anyways, we were all hanging out listening to music driving towards the road. We made the turn to go past the abandoned church onto the short road leading to the military base gate. My friend picked up some speed going up to the gate, and we turned onto the dark wooded road, going fast but not too fast yet, in case any cops that sometimes hang around the area were there. We made it towards the end of the road and made a quick U-turn to go back the same way we had come from. But only this time we were going a little faster through the dark, quiet woods, carrying through the corners swiftly. We got back to the military gate, and my friend made the turn back down towards the abandoned church, picking up speed as we went down the hill. Right as we reached the bottom of the hill, we all noticed something that sounded like a stick hitting the side of the car with a hard-sounding thud. My friend hit the brakes and slowed down to about 20 miles per hour. We all started asking questions as to what just happened. Being the only one that didn't see what happened from the back driver's side seat, I thought we just hit a branch, kicking it up off the ground and making it hit the side of the car. My friends quickly reassured me that they both didn't see a branch in the road, and they both saw it come from the woods, hitting the driver's side quarter panel and window as if it was thrown at us. We all concluded that it was probably somebody that might have been walking down the road, and for some reason we didn't see them, and they were probably angry at us for speeding by. We turned around at the end of the short road to see if that was true, and then we noticed another car coming our way. They were passing the same spot that we were at when we collided with the branch. This car very obviously slowed down when passing that spot, and then sped back up before passing us. It was a little weird. It was as if it seemed like they had experienced the same thing we had. We got all the way back up to the gate, and didn't see anybody walking, and didn't even see a single branch in the road either. I told my friend to loop back around and go really slow past where the branch was thrown at us. As we passed the spot, I saw a clearing in the bushes. I'm not sure what the clearing is for, but it looked like the opening to an old service road that has since been overgrown by these invasive bamboo-looking bushes. I started to point out the spot to my friends, and as I did, I saw something in the opening. I only saw it for a brief second, as the car's headlights were now too far past to light the figure up, but I know for a fact I saw something pale and kind of gray-looking sitting in that tiny opening. I froze after seeing it, and didn't know what to tell my friends. It was almost ironic that I saw something, because moments before, I was thinking about tricking my buddies into thinking I saw something and freaking them out. But that joke turned into reality. I didn't see enough of it to determine if it was a person, animal, or anything alive for that matter. But I know it wasn't just the bushes or a tree trunk. There was something in that clearing. I told my friends that I saw something, and we looped around one last time. This time, my friend positioned the car to face the opening so that we would get a clear view with the headlights. Of course, whatever I saw was gone. Nothing was there but a space no bigger than a car and a thick bush around it. They still believed me though, and we hightailed it out of there. We got to my friend's house and out to inspect the car for dents or scratches, and sure enough, it had some. One noticeable dent with a couple of tiny pale chips and a few good scratches. My friend's car is older, so he didn't really care. We concluded that it was just some kids messing around, even though it wouldn't really make sense being there were no cars parked anywhere on the side of the road or houses close enough to justify walking there. Also, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, so who would be out there? Even our original thought of somebody walking there was kind of a stretch of our logic. Looking back, what I saw kind of looked like someone or something's shoulder getting briefly caught by the light, but who knows? Maybe it's a ghost who haunts the road at night and was finally getting revenge for people tearing up and down the road with our obnoxious cars. There were no overhanging trees that could have had a branch fall on us or wind blow it onto us somehow. My friends are sure that the trajectory that the branch took was in no way natural, and the dent in the car proves it. I'm going to tell you the story of a really strange thing that happened a while back. This was 2 years ago, and I was living with a roommate named Mallory, who is one of my best friends. We're still good friends today, but no longer live together. So we lived in this 2-bedroom apartment on the first floor of the building. It was an average place. I liked the apartment because it had 2 bedrooms and a living room and kitchen in the middle. Mallory and I each had our own bedrooms as well as bathrooms which were connected to the bedrooms. Living in the apartment was fun. Sometimes the other friends in our friend group would come over and hang out. But one night Mallory was gone late as she had to work, and then told me that she was going to her parents' after for dinner. I remember that I had to work late that night, and I arrived back at the apartment at roughly 9 p.m. After getting back, Mallory was still gone, so I was there by myself. I changed and then sat down on the couch with some food and started watching TV. I wasn't sure exactly what time Mallory would be back. As I was sitting on the couch and watching TV, I started to feel relaxed, but that feeling quickly went away. Out of nowhere, the TV that I was watching shut off. It was really strange. The power did not go out because the other lights remained on. I grabbed the remote and then turned the TV back on, but within probably 5 seconds, it shut off again. I knew that I did not touch the remote and I didn't know what was going on, so I got up and walked over to the TV. I'm not sure what I was looking for, if maybe a cord was becoming unplugged from the wall or something like that. It was really strange, and now that the TV was off, the apartment was completely quiet. As I was standing, I was closer to our back window. This looked out to behind the apartment complex, which had a walking path, and behind that was trees and people's backyards in a nearby neighborhood. The blinds were mostly closed, but standing by them you could sort of see between them. At a distance, it looked just dark outside, but now that I was close up, I suddenly saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. It was coming from outside, and I looked over and saw someone or something moving farther down. I went over to the window and moved some of the blinds and looked out. I was just on time to see a man running away really close to the apartment. I only saw his back as he was illuminated by other people's backlights being on. He was wearing a sweatshirt and hood which covered his head from the backside. He jogged away and was quickly out of sight. The man had been so close to my apartment, and there was no way that he had just been out walking on the trail. That was about 50 feet away. For some reason, he was deliberately right behind my apartment. I stayed there watching for a while, and he did not return. After that, I turned the TV back on, and it did not turn right back off. In fact, it didn't turn off by itself at all anymore. I sat on the couch and continued to watch TV, wondering if it would turn back off, but it never did. About 30 minutes later, Mallory got back home. I told her about the strange occurrences. We concluded that the man that ran away was most likely right outside of our window, and he must have had a remote and turned the TV off for some reason. With Roku TVs which we had, the remotes tend to work with all the other televisions, so that's very possible. But the question that I have is why? Was it just a funny prank? I found it to be really creepy, especially that hour at night, and I'm really glad that it never happened again after that. I was driving back home from work really late one night a few months ago. I was on the highway, and by this time it was pretty quiet. There were a few other cars out here and there. I was maybe 15 minutes from home and would take this highway for most of the trip. Out of nowhere, I started getting tailgated by the guy behind me. He drove up and got right on my bumper and then was going really close. And I was in the right lane, so I didn't understand why he wouldn't just pass me. I had already been on the highway for maybe 10 minutes and was just cruising in the right lane the entire time, so I don't think I could have done anything to make the guy angry or something like that. As he drove right behind me, I slowed down, hoping that he would pass, but he didn't. He just continued to drive right behind me. Then, a couple of minutes after that, he started flashing his brights on and off. It was like he was trying to get my attention, but I didn't know why. Maybe something was wrong with my car, like I had a tire going down. I didn't feel anything though, and I had no clue what this guy behind me was doing. I kept driving for another few minutes, and he continued to follow me real close and flash his brights and stuff. So I decided to take the next exit and see if the guy would follow me. About a mile down the highway, an exit came up. I took it, and the guy behind me did not. He continued down the highway. I felt very relieved, but also confused. What on earth was that all about? I didn't know, but I decided to pull into a gas station to see if something was wrong with my car. When I did, I got out and looked around. Everything seemed fine. No lights were out, no flat tires or low tires, and the car wasn't smoking or anything. It all appeared just fine, so I had absolutely no clue what the guy's problem was. I decided to continue home at that point. When I got back onto the highway, I was only a couple of miles from my exit. So a few minutes later, I took it, and then I was home within the next 5 minutes, and I didn't see the car in the entire rest of my drive back. After I got back to my house, I parked my car in the driveway, got out, and went inside. I was glad to finally be home with it being so late at night. So I went into my bedroom and then took a shower and changed. When I was done, I returned into my living room and noticed something weird. I saw lights coming from outside and went over to the living room window. When I did, I saw a car parked in my driveway. It was sort of turned so that it was angled where it was facing my large front window. The car's brights were on. Then it started flashing its lights from normal to bright. This was the same car that had been following me. How did this guy know my address? I was really creeped out, as you could imagine. I didn't really know what to do. I stayed there just watching out of disbelief for a little while. The car stayed there flashing its lights and revving its engine. This went on for maybe 2 full minutes. Then, suddenly, the car stopped, then very quickly backed out of the driveway and then sped away into the night. It was gone, and I stayed at the window watching for a while, but it did not return. I was left even more confused now. I was so creeped out that I went around and covered every window. Eventually, I was able to go to sleep. Things were fine the next morning, and I haven't seen that car since or been followed or anything strange. This was not too long ago, and knowing that that creep knows where I live makes me worried. I'm just hoping that he never returns. This was something that happened back when I was a kid. I was 8 years old at the time, but I remember it pretty well. So I have an older sister who is a few years older than me. I remember that it was a weekend and my sister was sleeping over at a friend's house that night, so it was just me and my parents at home. I remember that night we all went into the living room and were watching a football game. I really enjoyed watching the game with my parents, especially my dad, who knows a lot about sports. At halftime, I left the living room and went to go outside into the backyard. I was a really active kid and always liked to go into our backyard and practice sports. We had a pretty small backyard, but it had nice short grass and was completely fenced in with a sort of high wooden fence. So I would always be back there tossing the ball around or something. I remember that I left the living room, went through the kitchen, and then got to the back door. As soon as I stepped out into the backyard, I saw a man back there. There was this guy who I had never seen before just standing in the backyard about 20 feet away from me. As soon as I saw him, I just turned right back around and then went back inside the house. Looking back, I'm not sure what exactly I was thinking. Maybe I thought the guy must have been a neighbor, but for some reason, I seemed to assume that the man was not up to no good, but had a logical reason for being in our backyard. Maybe it was because he was just wearing normal clothes and looked like an average guy. Maybe I thought that if he was some criminal that he would be wearing a ski mask or something. I was a shy kid and just decided to walk away without questioning him or saying anything. In my second or two in the backyard, the man did look at me, but did not say anything at all. So I got back inside and went straight for the living room where my parents were. Once I got back there, I felt safe again. However, I did not even bother to lock the back door or anything, which makes me mad at my younger self looking back. But as an 8-year-old kid, you don't always think the best. I continued to watch TV with my parents, now watching the halftime report. We were all on the couch, and maybe 5 minutes later during a commercial break, I just barely heard what sounded like the back door opening. You could not see it from the living room where we were, and I could just barely hear it. It sounded like the door was being opened very slow and deliberately. I had no idea that the man who was in our backyard would try to enter our house. This immediately creeped me out. My parents did not seem to hear the door opening at all. They were still just sitting on the couch and watching TV and chatting. Moments later, I thought I heard footsteps, so I decided to mention the man in the backyard. I told my parents about what happened, and when I went outside, my dad said that he would get up and go look. When he started walking over to the kitchen, we all heard footsteps quickly moving away. But the footsteps were not going back outside. They were moving farther into the house towards my parents' bedroom. My dad heard this, and I think he maybe saw the guy for a second too. I heard him say something like, "Who are you?" Then he turned back and quickly went into the living room. He told my mom and I to go down into the basement and to lock the door of whatever room we went in. He also told my mom to call the police. Then I saw him go back over towards my parents' bedroom. I went with my mom quickly downstairs, and we went into the bathroom down there and locked the door. I was pretty scared. About 5 minutes later, my dad came down and said that the police were on the way. He said that some random guy was in our house, and he basically chased him out of it. My dad wasn't hurt or anything, the guy didn't try to fight him, and nothing was stolen either. The cops got there a short time later. My parents talked with the police, and I told them what I saw as well. I learned a lesson to always lock the doors and stuff like that. After that, nothing else similar happened. Looking back, I wonder what that guy's plans were. It really creeps me out that even after seeing me and figuring that my parents were probably home, he still decided to go inside our house. I live off a highway. It's kind of strange because generally highways don't have houses on them. But I live out in the country, and while it's a busy highway, my section of it is not as busy as others. So late at night, it's not too bad as far as car noises and such. It never really gets much traffic or anything like that either, because I'm not near any major cities. It's pretty far out there, and it's very rural. My driveway is also rather long, and my property is several acres. The houses here are spread out, and when I bought the place 30 years ago, one of the reasons it was cheap was because of the fact that it's on a highway. The front yard is very long, and there's a ditch at the front. Then there's this row of pine trees kind of acting as a wall to block my house from the highway, because the trees are very large. Overall, I've never had any problems with being right on a highway, and by now, I'm obviously very used to it. Over the years, there have been a couple of crashes into my yard, and a couple of cop chases going by. The crashes were never that bad. One time somebody hit a tree, and another time went into the ditch. Occasionally, sometimes people will also turn into my driveway just to turn around, or just continue and keep going. This is because of the fact that it's right off the highway. People get lost and stuff, but I've never really had anything too crazy or suspicious happen, until this one night. I'm going to tell you the strangest thing that has happened in my time living here. So one night, I was by myself at home, hanging out in the living room. It was pretty late, I'm guessing around 11 o'clock or so. As I was watching TV, I noticed hearing some sounds out front near the highway. I couldn't tell exactly what it was. Normally, I will hear cars driving by, but it's not too loud. My house is far enough from the highway that it's hardly a bother. I got up and walked towards the front of the house. When I got there, I noticed that there appeared to be several cars parked on the side of the road. By now, not many cars were driving down the highway, just a couple a minute, I would say. Now, the pine trees were partly blocking my view of the road and the cars. There was basically a few feet in between each tree where I could see the road. So I could tell that there were cars parked alongside of it, and I could see there were at least 5 of them between the trees. This seemed really strange. Why would there be a bunch of cars parked on the side of the road? There were a number of possible explanations, but I wanted to see for myself. I continued looking out the window for a short time, and I didn't see or hear anything strange. My thought was that maybe it was a minor crash, like a fender bender, but I did not see any people walking around outside of the cars. Of course, my view was obstructed. After not seeing anything for a couple of minutes, I got up and decided to go outside and see for myself. I walked out the front door and then through my long front yard. When I got past the pine trees, I saw that there were about 5 or 6 cars all parked on the side of the road. None of them had any damage on them, and they were all parked about equidistant apart. But nobody was inside any of them, and there was nobody else in sight. I was so confused. I thought for a moment that maybe this was one of those car meetups, but none of these cars were fancy or that nice. One of the cars was completely blocking my driveway, which kind of made me angry. I called out asking if anybody was there. I looked up and down the highway both ways, but saw no one, and nobody responded to my call either. My house was really not near anything else, like a building or park, or even another house, so it's not like it would be my next door neighbor having a party and the people parked there, because my next door neighbor is almost half a mile down the road. As confused as I was, I decided to go back inside. I thought about calling the cops, but I figured I would wait at least until I was going to bed and then check out the windows again to see if they moved. As I was walking through my long front yard towards my house, I saw something. There were two guys walking through my backyard. I could just barely see them. I knew they weren't supposed to be back there and were probably related to the cars parked in front of my house. I walked faster and got back to my front step. Then I went inside and locked the door. A short time after getting back in, maybe 30 seconds, I heard somebody trying to open my back door. This had to be the guys that were in my yard. I was very confused as to what was going on, but decided to go ahead now with my call to the police. I took out my cell phone and dialed 911. As I did this, I heard somebody start to knock on the back door. I didn't go over there. I just waited for the 911 operator to answer and then told them what was going on. I heard some bushes moving that were at the back of my house and what sounded like multiple people back there moving around. After I finished my call with the police, I waited. I decided to go to the rear of my house to see if the guys were still there. When I did, they were not there anymore, so I went around and looked out of some other windows. I didn't see them. When I got to the front of the house, I saw one of the cars driving away. The others followed. Within a minute, all the cars were gone. The cops got there a while later, but everybody had left. I told them what happened, and they looked around a little. I gave them descriptions of the cars, and then the police left. I never heard anything back after that. I really don't know what was going on there. It was very strange. My best guess is a possible robbery. I only saw two guys, but with all the cars that were there had to have been at least 5, which kind of creeps me out. Why they just left though, I'm not sure. I'm glad they did though. I live by this nature preserve on a dark road, which has hiking, frisbee golf, and a park, among other stuff. I was around 13 or 14 at the time, and it was the summertime. During the summer, my friends and I love to go on the trails at the nature preserve at night because it's quiet, creepy, and we love the adrenaline. Now, most of the trails are quite short, but one of them is 2.5 miles long, and it goes through about half of the entire nature preserve. We had been scared to go down this trail at night, but this time we finally decided to face our fears and go for it. We went down the trail, which is this gravel road, and it's quite wide, so we were all next to each other on our bikes, about 6 of us. Now the trail is surrounded by woods completely, and there was no light, and to make it extra creepy, we decided not to use any flashlights, which was a terrible idea. So we were going down this trail, and out of nowhere, we saw about 8 deer in the middle of the trail just standing still. Now for some reason, my friend has a fear of deer, and he was panicking and wanted to go back, but we didn't want to let him go by himself. But we also didn't want to leave the trail, so we kind of forced him to stay. Out of nowhere, the deer started running into the woods, as if they were startled by a potential predator. You know when you're in the woods and you hear crickets, frogs, and other animals? They all went quiet, and we were standing in complete utter silence. We were a little freaked out standing in the middle of the trail, expecting a bear or something to pop out. We stayed in the spot for about a minute or two until all the sounds came back and everything seemed to be normal. Even after that, we still had the will to keep going down the trail. So we kept biking, and out of nowhere the trail got very narrow, only about 5 feet wide, and we didn't realize it. So we all just biked straight into the woods off the trail and crashed into bushes. It took a little to recuperate, but we got into a straight line and went down the narrow trail. At this point, the trail went from gravel road to just a small narrow dirt path. The following moments are by far the scariest moments of my life. We were going down the narrow path, and I randomly looked to my right and noticed a bit of light. We noticed that we were next to a road in the distance, meaning we were nearing the end of the trail. I was looking at this road, and I wasn't paying attention to what was in front of me, and I ran straight into the person in front of me, and it was like a domino effect, and we all fell. As we were getting back up, We began to hear the sound of wood knocking all around us, and then we heard people talking. It was like what it sounds like to be in a room full of people talking, so you can hear people talking but you can't really make out what they're saying. The voices stopped, and we noticed a silhouette on the road in the distance. It was just standing looking right at us, and we took this as a sign to turn around and leave. We raced back down the way we had come from, and I'm surprised we didn't crash again. As we were riding back as fast as we could, my bike chain broke. We stopped and fixed it as fast as we could. As we were fixing it, the woods went quiet again, and I heard extremely heavy footsteps down the road behind us. We got the chain on and booked it out of there. As we exited the trail, we got back onto the road that my neighborhood is on. We heard what sounded like a woman's screech coming from the trail, and we raced home and never went back to that trail again.